Welcome to the Football Reporters. Well, this week we've got an Africa Cup of Nations special. The tournament starts in Morocco later this week, and it's going to have a pretty big impact on the Premier League. Certain teams have got several players that are going to be going to the tournament. Some have got a few, others have got none. We'll discuss that in the next few minutes, but we're going to start off with Man United. Rob Dawson, our Manchester correspondent. Rob, United have got three players that are going to the Africa Cup of Nations. Two very big players in Bryan Mbeumo and Amad Diallo, but also Nassim Mazraoui with Morocco, who is certainly a good utility player for Ruben Amorim's team. So how are Man United going to cope without, certainly 2-3 of their most important players?
Well, I mean, that's the golden question that Ruben Amorim is going to have to answer. I mean, how do you cope with losing two of your best players in Amad Diallo and Bryan Mbeumo? Also, you mentioned there Mazraoui, who Amorim likes quite a lot. I mean, not only are Amad and Mbeumo two of Amorim's best players, it's also essentially the entire right side of his team. The best combinations that United have been able to put together this season have been down that right-hand side with Amad and Mbeumo kind of linking up, creating chances and scoring goals themselves. I mean, Mbeumo has got 7 in 16 games for Man United this season since joining from Brentford. So, he's one of United's main goal threats, if not their main goal threat. So it's going to be really, really tough for Amorim to cope. I mean, the squad is not particularly deep anyway. He hasn't got an awful lot of options. They've made the decision to strip the squad back in the summer because they weren't playing European football. He has got players who can play in those positions. Presume that it's going to be Dallo at right wing back instead of Amad. The front three will probably be a variation of Sesko, Mount, and Mateus Cunha. Possibly you could have Bruno Fernandes moving into one of those 10 roles if Kobbie Mainoo plays deeper, but there's no guarantee there. So it is going to be really, really tough for Amorim. I mean, the one thing I was going to ask you, Mark, is obviously United will have known all about this when they signed Mbeumo. It's no surprise that he's going to go off to AFCON. Do you think that Amorim, if results do tail off a little bit, deserves a little bit of leeway when those players leave, or will he just have to find a solution?
I mean, both really. He should be given some leeway because you're right, he's been left with a squad that is pretty thin. That is a decision by the recruitment team. I'm not sure Amorim would have preferred a couple more players, or certainly players of more quality, because we know that the lack of game time he gave to Joshua Zirkzee prior to Benjamin Sesko's injury tells you how much he rates Joshua Zirkzee. So I don't think he's going to be ultimately Amorim's favourite pick, but he's going to have to play him because he doesn't have the options. I think, I remember when Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge, and obviously we're going back, 10, 15, 20 years now, and there was a club policy at the time not to sign African players because, they felt that it was too big a risk losing players who were key players for 4 to 6 weeks of the season. Now, they did have Quinton Fortune who played for South Africa, but Quinton Fortune was at best a squad player. But you're talking now, and Mbeumo is not a squad player. He's one of United's most important players, so they're clearly going to miss him. But you would rather have Bryan Mbeumo in your squad for all but 6 weeks of the season than not sign him at all. I don't think United could have looked at him and said, well, let's not sign Mbeumo because he'll be going away in January. I think you had to sign him because he's such a good player. He's proven to be that. But they have left themselves very short in a key area. So you take out Amad, you take out Mbeumo. And I have been wondering who they're going to play up front. You've mentioned the names, but it leaves United wafer thin in terms of, injuries. The squad is weak enough as it is. You're asking the club to go through a month without their big players being injured. But obviously, Nkunku's had a recent injury situation. Sesko is still not back into the team. Well, maybe back into the team for the Christmas period, but he's missed, over a month. So can you rely on Mason Mount to stay fit during that period of time? It's a big gamble on United's part to go into this period with so many key players, vital to the team, and one injury away from a crisis, really. So, but that's United's decision. They made that decision in the summer, and I guess Rob, do you think there's? I don't think there are, but from your perspective, do you think there's anyone in the youth team that could come through? We haven't seen any kind of promotion yet of younger players. We keep talking about JJ Gabriel, but he's only 15. I don't think he's going to come into the team, but are there any kids that you can promote? I know he's been reluctant to do it with Kobbie Mainoo, so what is the situation beneath the first team?
Yeah, I don't think that Amorim has been particularly impressed with the academy, to be honest. He's had Shea Lacey on the bench for the last couple of weeks because of a lack of options just to kind of make up the numbers, essentially. Shea Lacey is probably the best prospect in the academy at the moment. He deserves his chance to be in the squad, but Amorim has shown a reluctance to actually chuck him on, even in games where United have been chasing a goal, like Everton at Old Trafford and West Ham as well. So it kind of shows you where Shea Lacey is in the pecking order. I think it would be I would be very, very surprised if Mbeumo and Amad Diallo go off to AFCON and suddenly Shea Lacey's sort of playing regularly or getting regular minutes off the bench, because Amrim just hasn't shown any kind of enthusiasm for that. And I wouldn't expect that to change. And there is a problem there with the depth of the squad. If you haven't got those players coming through who you're willing to give minutes to. There was criticism of Amrim during the Everton game that he didn't make enough changes to try and chase the game and score a goal. But Amrim's defence after that game was, well, who do you want me to put on? In the Everton game, the only attacking change really he had to make was Mason Mount off the bench. Same against West Ham. There just wasn't the options there to chuck on a load of attackers to try and get you a goal, because the minute you got injuries to two of your main forwards in Šeško and Cunha, the options just look really, really thin. And it's a massive worry, particularly because United have got tricky games over Christmas. They've got Villa at Villa Park on December the 21st. They've got Newcastle at home on Boxing Day. If Bryan Mbeumo, if he gets to the final of AFCON, the final I think is on January the 18th. United are due to play City, I think, on January the 17th. That just tells you how tricky their fixture list is, and it will be interesting to see what Amrim does, because he hasn't got the luxury of not throwing away games, but going through a really bad patch of form again, because things have picked up a little bit over the last couple of weeks. They had a decent win against Wolves, but it does all feel very much on a knife edge. And if you do lose a couple of players, it could all go back the other way. And Amrim has said that for the last couple of weeks. Even when things have been all right, he said, well, things can change very, very quickly. And the one thing that's going to change for Man United in the next week or so is losing Amad and Mbeumo, who are essentially his two best players.
Yeah, so there's big question marks of United, how they can cope. But let's just throw it forward to the title race now, because I guess obviously Arsenal and Chelsea, the two front runners, they have been in recent weeks. They have no players in the African nations. You've got Liverpool. We've got the situation with Mo Salah. Now I'm lumping Liverpool in the title race because they are the champions and they have got a squad capable of getting back into it. You'd think that looking at the teams that are up and around that title race, that none of them seem to be too badly affected. I don't think City are really going to be over affected by losing Omar Mamouche and Ryan Ait-Nouri. But I guess if Erling Haaland gets injured, then no Mamouche for 4 to 6 weeks. Egypt will be expected to go quite a long way. Do you think City might pay a price there if Haaland gets injured? And that's the thing, is if Haaland gets injured, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the one looking at City's squad, losing Marmoush and Ait-Nouri, they aren't two players who are playing regularly at the moment, but Marmoush is essentially Erling Haaland's understudy. And we saw against Real Madrid in the Bernabeu that when Pep Guardiola wants to make a change with 20 minutes to go, he takes Erling Haaland off and puts Marmoush on. There isn't anyone else really who can not do what Haaland does, because no one can really do what he does, but can kind of sub in for him and just be a body to play at centre forward. So what it means is that if Haaland does get injured, there isn't really anyone there to replace him, which is obviously worst case scenario for Pep Guardiola. But it also means that perhaps in games that are quite tight, like we saw against Real Madrid, that the option there to bring on Marmoush for Haaland is removed as well. So maybe it means that Haaland will have to play more minutes, which isn't great for him, because they want to kind of wrap him in cotton wool a little bit, really. They want to manage his minutes as much as possible, because they know they just can't do without him. So it may not feel like a massive deal to lose Marmoush because he's just not playing particularly regularly, but it is a big deal to Pep, because it just means it's one less option, and maybe Erling Haaland is going to have to play more than they want him to. There's a game against Brentford in the Carabao Cup, a quarter-final. Really that would be a game that Marmoush would start, but maybe Erling Haaland is going to have to play a part in that game, when really, if everyone was fit and available, that Erling Haaland would probably be given the day off and told to go and have a sauna and relax for the Premier League game at the weekend. So it is going to be tough, and it's going to be tough for a load of different clubs. I mean, you're just looking down the list of teams who are losing players. Sunderland are obviously flying at the moment; they're in 9th, but they're going to lose 6 players. You would assume that that's going to be a massive thing for Sunderland, and you wouldn't be surprised if they have quite a significant drop off if they're losing essentially, a third of their squad almost.
Yeah, it's a huge blow for Sunderland, because they've been such a tight-knit squad as well. I mean, Labris has done an amazing job up there, and they are kind of in contention for European football now. I guess that if they started the season and said you're going to miss out on European football because of the African nations, they'd gladly take that, because I think their priority was to stay up. But clearly, they are going to suffer for having so many players away. I think Wolves as well. Wolves look doomed, but they're going to lose 3. So their weaknesses are going to be even more exacerbated by the loss of players to the Africa Cup of Nations. But I just want to go back to Liverpool because, we've spoken about how United are going to be hit hard by their absences and potentially City might be hit hard by the loss of Marmoush if Haaland gets injured. Yeah. With Liverpool and Salah, do you not think that in many ways that actually might help both parties that he goes away for 3 or 4 weeks because he's out of the scene. He's obviously not happy at Liverpool, but him not being there, does that allow the situation to calm down, or does it just kind of knock it down the road until we come back in middle of January?
No, I think it probably does help. I think maybe it's ironic, really. I imagine in the summer that Liverpool execs and Arne Slot were looking at that and thinking, "Oh, we can't do without Mo Salah for 6 weeks in December and January." And now he's probably thinking it's an absolute blessing because you get to kick the can down the road for a little bit. You get the situation will cool off because he's away from Liverpool. There won't be questions aimed at Slot every single Friday at his news conferences, just asking, is he going to play? Is he going to play? Is he going to play? Because he'll be away with Egypt. I think it just gives everyone a chance to kind of calm down a little bit. The issue is then going to be what happens in January. It doesn't seem clear yet whether he's actually going to come back and play for Liverpool again. Is there going to be a bid from Saudi Arabia? I mean, I think we both know that there's been interest from Saudi in Mo Salah in the past, so it would seem like the ideal opportunity for a club with deep pockets like Al Hilal to go back in and try and sign him because, it would appear that relationship is almost irretrievable now between Salah and Slot and the club. So there are a lot of unknowns, but I think from Liverpool's point of view right now, I think it does solve a little bit of a problem that it gets him out of Liverpool, it gets him away playing football, it removes the situation or kicks it down the road for a few months, and then they'll address it when he comes back. I mean, just looking at it now, I know you did a load of stuff after those comments that he made at Leeds. Where is your money? Do you think that he plays for Liverpool again? Do you think that he goes in January? Do you think we'll ever see him in a Liverpool shirt again?
It's a really tough one because we've both worked through situations where you think players are never coming back. I mean, Wayne Rooney in 2010 at Man United, I thought that was it. He issued a statement hours before kickoff in a Champions League game, and that really upset a lot of people at the club, but he ended up signing a new contract. Carlos Tevez at Man City was never going to play for him again, but he came back after 7 or 8 months. We've seen, I think, Luis Suarez at Liverpool back in the day. That was a big one as well. So there are plenty of recent examples of players that you think have taken it to the limit, but they end up staying. So I think with Salah, it's slightly different in the sense that he's not playing his peak anymore. So he's a player that Liverpool financially could lose. They've obviously brought his replacements in, his long-term replacements, by signing Isak Ekitike and Florian Wirtz in the summer. So I don't think anyone at Liverpool would say, let's get this deal done now. But I think it would suit Liverpool in many ways to let him go. He's not been the player. Listen, he's not been great this season, but equally, if you look back for the last 6 months, you look back the last 3 or 4 months of last season, his form has dipped. I think it's 9 goals in his last 33 appearances. So who knows, maybe Mo Salah has started the decline. And if Liverpool get an offer in January that takes off the wage bill and gives him some money as well, then I think he could leave. And I think Salah, it sounds like he wants to go. I don't think this is a kind of a plea for greater support, or, some people have interpreted it as me or him in terms of I go or Arne Slot goes. I don't think it's that. So I think Salah has probably looked at it thinking, I'm no longer the future. I'm a great part of Liverpool's past, but it's not what it was. So I think the odds favour him going in January. And I think if that happens, I think that puts Liverpool in the box seat for someone like Antoine Semenyo, who is the player they like. I think City like him as well. But key point in this is that Antoine Semenyo is a Ghana international, but Ghana haven't qualified for the African nations. So another, big thing for England. England play Ghana in the World Cup next summer, but Ghana won't be at the African nations. So what does that say about Ghana? But ultimately, from Semenyo's point of view, it means that for the whole of January, he's around and able to be transferred out of Bournemouth. So Liverpool might think, let's cash in on Salah, let's make a move for Semenyo, and that would make a lot of sense. But, also in terms of the transfer window, like you said before, Rob, that the finals on January the 18th. So that means that a lot of clubs are going to wait. I think are going to wait until the end of the African nations for the last 2 weeks of January, then do their business. So Man United, for instance, we know that they desperately need players in, but they need to get players out. So I can't see Kobbie Mainoo, Joshua Zirkzee, even Tyrell Malacia going anywhere in the first 2 weeks of January. But once the African nations finishes and they get their players back, then United could look to move players on, because that's when they won't be kind of exposed to having a really thin squad. So I think it will have an impact on the transfer window initially, but I think by mid-January, I think a lot of the teams will be back anyway, a lot of the players will be back anyway, and they'll all be back by mid-January, January 19th. So I think that's when the transfer window will really kick into gear. And clubs like United, who haven't got a lot of money to spend, as we know, that's when they could do business by getting players out in order to get players in.
Yeah, and that, I mean, United is one of the key ones, particularly with Mainu and Xerxes, because there's been a lot of speculation about both of them that they want to go and want to play more regularly to force their way into squads before the World Cup. I mean, the message from United has been that those two players, while they appreciate that they're not playing as often as they would like, then they've not been frozen out. You know, they're always in the match day squads if they're available, and that is a big distinction to make. They aren't surplus to requirements essentially by Ruben Amorim, but they're just not playing in the first team every single week. So someone like Mainu, I think he is going to have to wait until after the Africa Cup of Nations when, you know, Ahmad and Mbeumo come back, because United will want to make sure that they come back fit and available, and also that they have enough players to cover those two while they're away. And I mentioned at the start of the conversation that one of the possibilities that Amorim may look into is to pick Mainu in central midfield next to Casemiro. You move Fernandes into that number 10 position, which is probably better suited to anyway, next to Cunha with Sesko up front, and it gives you a little bit, you know, a couple more options. Now, obviously, that would depend on Ruben Amorim actually picking Mainu, which so far he just hasn't seemed to want to do. But in regards to his future, I just don't see that United are going to be in a position to do anything with Mainu until after the final of the Africa Cup of Nations, because they're just not going to know. And then it doesn't leave an awful lot of time then. I mean, the final is January the 18th. The window is going to close at the end of January. It doesn't leave you an awful lot of time then to sort moves out. And United's one thing that Ruben Amorim and United have both said is that they're not in the business of just helping players reach a World Cup. They're not going to go out of their way to help Mainu find more games to get himself in the England squad. Ultimately, their duty is to look after Man United. And if they see him as a viable option for United, they're just not going to let him go. So I don't think it's completely cut and dried that Mainu will get to go at all. And if he does get to go, as you just said there, it will be later in the window.
Do you see a scenario whereby Kobe Mainu goes mid to late January in a deal that facilitates the move for Carlos Baleba at Brighton? Obviously, Carlos Baleba could be away for the whole duration of the African nations with Cameroon. Could Kobe Mainu end up at Brighton as part of a deal? You know, there's obviously possibilities there for Kobe Mainu. I mean, I don't see it myself, but I mean, it's one possibility that could arise if United are creative in the final weeks of the window. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, it's someone that United looked at in the summer. I don't see United making a massive major addition in January, just because, again, their message has been that they've got a long-term plan and they want to stick to it, and they're aiming for the summer. Now, that doesn't mean that an opportunity may not arise in January that they think, well, we have to react to this and make the most of it and try and do something. You know, in the way that they did with Bruno Fernandes when he came in from Sporting, a deal that was done in January. So United are leaving themselves open to that possibility. I don't think that they're particularly planning on spending big money in January. There's also a possibility that something, you know, relatively short term might come up. I mean, there's been talk of Conor Gallagher at Atletico Madrid, possibly on loan. I mean, United haven't really said an awful lot about that. They've been quite cool on those links in the past. So again, I would be surprised. But, you know, there is still a few weeks before the January transfer window. You and I both know that, you know, anything can happen, and clubs tend to react sometimes to different situations, whether it's injuries or, you know, players dropping out of form or opportunities arising in the window that perhaps they weren't expecting. So as of right now, I think that United maybe are looking at possibly a couple of departures, but nothing major incoming, and are focusing on the summer. But as I say, you know, with any of these clubs, never say never.
I think the bad news for United is that Morocco as the host will probably go a long way, if not go all the way to the final. So that means Mizraoui is likely to be away for the whole duration of the tournament. And Cameroon and Ivory Coast in the same group. They're in with Gabon and Mozambique. So I think they're both fancied to get out of that group. So from United's perspective, I don't think they're going to get in their players back early in the tournament. So they're going to have to find a way to get through it. But yeah, African nations, every time it comes around, every couple of years, it always has a disruptive effect on the Premier League. But, you know, they have some great players from Africa as well. The Sadio Manes, the Mo Salahs, the Didier Drogbas. So I think the Premier League benefits from their presence as a whole, but it does leave a hole in the middle of the season fairly regularly. So we'll see how it pans out.